Hello, JSOM community, and welcome to the Parliament Podcast. I am your neighborhood-friendly marketing major, Troy Murray.
And I'm fellow marketing major, Trent here to discuss how COVID has affected students, staff, and the entire school.
Speaking of which, we are actually happy to welcome our esteemed guest this evening. Not only is she a big part in the marketing realm, helping to establish a foundation of JSOM communities, both in regular classes as well as honor distinctions, but she also has played a major part in industries such as the notorious 7-Eleven. Please welcome Mrs. Rita Egeland. Hi, Rita. How are you doing?
Hello. Thank you, Troy. It's great to be here.
It's fantastic to have you. We're super glad that you're able to come and help to address the key concerns that have been resulting as a result of the pandemic and how things have ultimately changed going into this semester.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. With that being said, I think that we can just kind of jump straight into this. And maybe the two of you can definitely help to clarify some of these points that I have ultimately brought to our attention today. Just in general, because as a matter of fact, we have a great representation in terms of student body as well as overall makeup of the JSOM community, mainly because not only do we have a student that's currently near campus and is attending classes in person, we also have me being a student that lives over 1,000 miles away currently in Las Vegas, Nevada, taking classes all remotely. And Ms. Egeland, I'm pretty sure that your class format has drastically changed as well, correct?
Yes, just remote at this time.
Exactly. No, I can only imagine the type of changes that have resulted because of it. Well, with that being said, though, Trent, maybe you can go ahead and clarify a couple of points on this for us. But in terms of what you've seen, what elements of JSOM have changed since the start of the fall semester?
Well, big one, obviously, is just the amount of students at the school. The few classes I do have in person, it's just a lot more empty. We do have to sit 6 feet apart per CDC guidelines, and it's just a way different experience. You don't really have that camaraderie of sitting there with a bunch of classmates, all kind of working together. It's just more of a kind of solo operation. We're just mostly just sitting and then kind of listening to the lecture. You have the occasional question, but that real, I guess, JSOM spirit is just not what it used to be.
Exactly, and I can only imagine like how it is from a student's perspective. But Professor Egeland, I imagine that it's probably been a big influence on you as well.
Oh, it's been a very material change, and I feel very badly because I wasn't exactly a crackerjack technology oriented professor in the classroom. We definitely had a couple of restarts, and now working from home and managing MS Teams and e-learning and having some hiccups, not only on my end, but too, sometimes students, get disconnected. So it's been very workable, but it's definitely been bumpy.
Exactly. And I can only imagine what it must be like from a professor's standpoint, just because I know from a student standpoint, there is a lot of key factors that ultimately influence how we take classes remotely, as well as just how the overall classwork is just structured. What are your guys' stances in terms of like how the course load has ultimately changed, not only from a professor's standpoint and how it's able to be made up, but also in the sense of taking it from a student's perspective? I think that's definitely something we should delve into.
So from a student's perspective, I've noticed just kind of a lot less kind of schoolwork. We've had the occasional weekly homework assignments for some of my classes, then the occasional quiz, but studying wise, it just feels a lot less. You listen to the lecture, you take your notes, and just with, for example, a lot of the hybrid asynchronous classes, instead of, for example, Tuesday, Thursdays is what I mostly have class-wise, and Tuesdays I'll go into class, and then for Thursdays is more of asynchronous, which typically would entail meeting with like a group in the class for either a study group or just group projects in general. But really, Thursday, sometimes you have nothing to do for that class besides study. So it just kind of shifted the balance. I feel a lot less focused on school than I probably should be. And that's just with the whole online. You feel less engaged, less, I guess, wanting to get up in the morning and go to class. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about it, Professor?
Well, for me, it's been a really big change, and I really appreciate your comments because it's impossible for me to see it from a student perspective otherwise, but I spent a good part of the summer retooling the class for, specifically for online. The spring was different, right? We'd established a relationship with the students and we were transitioning to online just for the purpose of wrapping things up, right? It was a little bit clunky and it was kind of a transition to online. for the fall semester, I really thought about much more about what can I do to break up the content. I can't lecture for an hour and 15 minutes with
Right.
some, spontaneous interaction with students that are engaged, raising their hands and having conversations, or calling on students that look like they're really engaged, but they might not be raising their hands. So I had to be a lot more methodical about breaking things up, creating many more exercises, because going for 45 or hour and 15 minutes I was going to lose people for sure. Creating in-class exercises, doing more discussion boards, which I hadn't done before because I was used to having, those types of things in class.
Like actual discussions in person.
Yeah, so I really created a lot of different exercises to help ensure that students were engaged and following the content and getting what they needed out of the content. But it ended up, which is, fine. But from my perspective, I ended up with a lot more work because I'm not going to have students do an in-class exercise as busy work, right? So
Definitely.
I'm now evaluating and giving feedback on, 55 plus students and what they've submitted, or, rating or grading discussion boards, creating more assignments. So I really appreciate the comment that, it doesn't feel as engaging for a student perhaps because it seems like the interaction is less.
Definitely.
But even the incremental interaction that I've created has created a tremendous amount of work. So it's
Exactly.
it's different.
For sure. And no, I actually,
Helpful.
absolutely. And it's also, I can attest to that whole fact as well, because Professor Egeland, I had your class last semester for the principles of marketing. And I think that some of the elements that we delved into towards the very end of the semester weren't as planned, I believe, especially with like, for example, the overall marketing presentation that we were doing at the very end for the product that we had been working on the entirety of the semester had to be taking place over like a virtual format. And I think it's ultimately because of that there has been that constant lack of engagement in the sense of presentation not being able to have that facial response for the individuals that don't turn on their cameras or anything like that, and like getting that nonverbal feedback in a way that helps to kind of touch up on their adjustments and allow them to kind of adapt to the presentation based off of reading the room. But now they're forced to like read a virtual room, which makes it all the more difficult.
Exactly. And also through the virtual, you're not even getting the energy that you get from the students and from the students that presented. I mean, that's my favorite part of the class, is when it culminates in a marketing presentation that the students have done. I'm always so impressed by their work, but you're not even giving them, the verbal feedback, and they're certainly not getting the energy from the class. So it's definitely quite a transition.
Exactly. Trent, have you experienced anything like this in your classes, either last semester or currently?
Well, last semester, especially, just that whole transition of going from in person, seeing people, depending on the class, presenting ideas in class, to just going online and just submitting either like a slideshow or just a written report that you don't really even get to elaborate on, just kind of ruins the engagement from it. Just out of the fact that you aren't able to express yourself in ways other than writing, which is very powerful, especially for the learning process, to where you're able to show what you know rather than just writing it down on an assignment where the professor doesn't actually know whether you really know it or if you're just kind of getting it tailored for the assignment.
Right. And that definitely kind of ties into the whole idea of marketing and how like business pitches and things have kind of altered over the course of time, which Miss Egeland, I actually was very interested in getting your point on this in terms of how the pandemic has ultimately influenced marketing procedures and how companies are adapting to their new environment. So I guess the kind of thing that I wanted to go in depth with you a little bit about is what type of tactics have you seen like marketing companies or business companies in general take in order to help reassure that they can help maintain the attention of the audience and still help create relationships of loyalty?
Well, one thing I think is really important about the marketing function, and it becomes potentially more so during a time like this, is it's always going to be important to understand what's critical to your customer. So if you have, like, say, a restaurant when we were, really in lockdown, or even a restaurant now where, given CDC guidelines, there's obviously spacing, and outdoors is, greatly preferred. Some of the restaurants initially, if you think of yourself as, we are a provider of, like, a high-end restaurant, like, let's take that for starters. We are the provider of high quality, innovative type of menu options, all right? And we have a higher income clientele. Then what some of them pivoted to something that made a lot of sense to me, which was, we have supply of higher end ingredients, whether that's lobster tails, exotic vegetables, etc. They started selling those directly to their restaurant patrons and their customers who are going to be cooking at home, or prospects that looked like their patrons. So understanding where the customer has gone and how your business might be relevant, I think, is really critical. If you're a dry cleaner, you may be out of luck because so few people are getting dressed up. But wait a second, it's like, what about the comforters and the drapes, right? Aren't people nesting more? Could you start promoting things that you dry clean that might be more relevant, right? So from a marketing perspective, it still comes down to customer insights and leveraging those insights for what's happening at the time, or what you anticipate to happen in the future.
Exactly. And I think the adjustments have overall changed as well in terms of, like, restaurant companies as well, and being able to accommodate, because you see a lot of new tactics for restaurants as they're trying to help distribute their products to the general masses. Like, you've seen, like, high-end restaurants now take on delivery, which is something that like I've never even seen before until the pandemic had arose. So I think it's just ultimately tackling those type of challenges that is a very keen element of focus in terms of how business procedures have ultimately delineated from a common norm that we faced prior to the coronavirus outbreak.
Got to be pretty flexible.
And we've seen plenty of it. But no, that's actually fantastic in that sense as well. And I also, a good solid transition that might help to see that is, I mentioned earlier, Professor Egeland, that you actually had been a main force in 7-Eleven prior to your teaching.
That's a little generous, but okay.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. Like the amount of times that we had, like, the lectures talking about, like, the campaigns that you had through your endeavors in the company. I think the biggest concern or point of address that I wanted to go off of was, how do you think things have altered in that type of industry as well, in terms of, like, gas stations and things of that nature? Because I can only imagine with people traveling less and less, the amount of gas that's being consumed by the general public has probably gone down immensely, right?
Yeah, it's probably a little bit similar to my dry cleaning example where, okay, so you're going to shift your focus. Now, 7-Eleven was really fortunate because it kind of reminds me of DoorDash and all the food delivery services. Mm-hmm. They had already looked at the technology trends and said, is there a way for us to play in this space? Would people be interested in ordering some of our products? Since we're all about convenience, we better use technology to make our product even more convenient. And I assume, because I haven't been there in a while, I assume that there was a question about whether, would people really order a Big Gulp or a Slurpee or a snack or anything?
Yeah, I can imagine.
When the pandemic, so they were prepared for testing. And when the pandemic hit, they were really fortunate because they already had the technology developed. And as I understand it, their the digital portion of their business is really growing. So to kind of, again, pivot to, all right, let's invest more in that, since people are traveling less, we're going to feel the pinch in our gasoline revenue. So how do we beef up the rest of it? I think they were well prepared for that, and they're fully leveraging it. So, because I'm getting messages now about, here are incentives to download our app and order product from us. And another thing they did that they did a while ago that prepared them for the future was they started selling wine in addition to beer. And apparently that's gone very well during the pandemic.
Yeah, oh, the adult consumption, absolutely. That's
Yes.
definitely something I can understand immensely. But that also kind of goes into another point that I had as well, in terms of like overall resources that students are able to kind of take advantage of. Because nowadays you see students have become like less engaged, whether it be because they're working remotely or because they are like more confined to like residences where they can call themselves safe. So I am kind of curious for both of your perspectives going forth with this is what type of resources do you think students could still like take full advantage of and utilize to the best of their ability to help enhance their college experience, though it may not be the same format that we had prior to everything that had currently taken place?
So one thing that a student could do is the library is still a great resource and is available and has been available even before the pandemic online, and that's only furthered the production of what they've done for it. And there's just so many different schools, well, I guess JSOM, that have that has upgraded its own websites just for the ease of access because there's such a large increase in online traffic
Mm-hmm.
to where the only way to really get students engaged is to have something that catches their eye and makes them want to learn. And Professor, what have you come across in that regard?
Well, I don't, my expectation, I was going to mention the library as well because it's a tremendous resource. Now, I have a projects class, which I will shamelessly plug right now.
By all means, go ahead.
On, on a client's marketing challenge. And that's when I really initially became really familiar with some of the library resources. One of the things that I don't know that students can appreciate it because they haven't been in the business world yet, but there's a lot of data out there. And we talk a lot about big data, and industries spend a tremendous amount of money. Financial institutions spend a tremendous amount of money collecting very, very critical information about industry trends, social trends, what's happening competitively in an industry. And organizations that want access to this pay thousands of dollars for a subscription, and much of this is available at the McDermott Library. So, you know, that's a resource that I definitely direct my students to because I think it's tremendous. The other thing that I would expect would be very beneficial, it's hard for me to even imagine how this is impacting students. I cannot imagine going to college in this kind of environment. And the fact that there are, you know, helplines or, you know, student resources for helping, you know, from a mental health perspective or just stress or anything in that category, I would definitely be taking advantage of that. And I'm sure these people the professionals are anxiously awaiting for students to reach out.
Absolutely. And kind of going off of that same line as well, because of the adaptations that we've had to face as a result of the pandemic, things like virtual organization fairs have become more and more common with like marketing fairs and like recruitment and doing online internships and things of that nature. So I would definitely like the CMC, the Career Management and like Success Center is definitely something that I feel like also students would be able to help take advantage of, especially because of now that's adapted to an online format. People can go have one-on-ones with academic advisors to like help break down their resume in a very crucial way and help to develop a new sense of being in terms of giving off a good portrayal to your general audience in terms of being a candidate for the workforce or going into the business realm. And having those resources and taking advantage of those type of things, I feel like is crucial now more than ever because of the sense of isolation. I think it's also, like you mentioned before, Professor, about how, like the sense of easiness in terms of conversating and talking and just like that sense of interaction has ultimately diminished as a result. And so through that lack of exposure, students have become less accustomed to like talking with individuals and being able to work jointly on certain projects or certain tasks that may be at hand. And so that's something that is definitely worthwhile. And also kind of going along those same lines, for me asking the two of you, do you have any like tips and tricks that you could give to any individuals that may be at JSOM that are looking to go into virtual career fairs, and what some potential individuals or hirers may be doing in order to what they might be specifically looking for to try and get students engaged and help to bring them on to the workforce from a remote location?
The ability to take interviews through something like Zoom or Microsoft Teams has made it a lot more easier to get an interview. Like even the company I work for, I've worked a lot with the staff and how they recruit, and just the ease of access of Zoom and Microsoft Teams has become such a positive way to interview people remotely. Even after COVID, will be used as more of an official format as well, just because you can interview someone across the country without having to pay to bring them in. And that can actually help cut down costs, which especially right now, a lot of companies are struggling with, costs, especially with the loss of business. So I see that as a very positive way that I guess COVID has affected interviews and just trying to get jobs and internships for students. Because one thing that like a lot of people struggled with is, for example, career fairs having the time constraints. Some are only from X hour to X hour on 2 days out of the week. And depending if you have class or other organizations you're part of where you can't miss those, it's a lot more accessible for a lot more students.
Exactly. And I don't know about you, man, but that was also a major thing that happened with me too, in terms of being able to attend like in-person organization fairs and in-person like internship opportunity fairs and things of that nature, because of some time constraints that I may have had with class conflicts and things of that nature. Professor Egeland, do you see that same problem presented in some of your classes that you may be teaching, in the sense of students being able to like go out and attend some of these things virtually, or has it been more advantageous as a result?
I definitely think it's more advantageous for all the reasons that were mentioned. 2 years before, at least 2 years before the pandemic hit, I had part of people in my network that come to me for advice on resumes, or I serve as a referral. They were preparing for virtual interviews. They were looking for jobs in Austin, or they're looking for jobs in California. And to your point, the expense, like a telephone interview just isn't as good, for the same reasons we've talked about. If you can't see the facial expressions, if you don't know whether the candidate is tracking with you or not, there are so many visual clues that you get from, it's not the same as in person, but certainly from a Zoom interview. So the ability to get comfortable in that on that type of platform, I think is tremendous for your career search. And I would say that's definitely a positive.
And it's also just a great transition in the sense of like people are like not having to like go to another building to go and commence these type of fairs, but it's just a click of a button where they can say, hey, I want to join my one-on-one meeting, and then there you are talking with somebody that like could potentially be as far as 1,000 miles away. That's now been made possible as a result. And I think that's also something very interesting. Trent, I don't know if you had this type of experience as well, but I think as a result of the pandemic, I was able to get connected with a lot more organizations and businesses and companies that I had never imagined getting in touch with prior to the outbreak. One of them specifically was this last summer. I had interned at this as a sales manager for a company called Greek House, where we were making customized apparel for different organizations and clubs and small businesses to kind of convey this idea that like we're more than just a platform where like people go on and make a t-shirt design and then it's done, but rather it's a way to like help create your own brand and to like make a recognizable logo that people can see like just from the attire that you've been able to accumulate and be able to continue to sell even after the campaign is ended. And I feel like that's this company was one that I was just kind of sprung upon, the moment that summer had happened. I was rapidly filling out a bunch of different applications. I'm pretty sure that Trent, you could agree on that one, sir.
Yeah.
But that was one of the key things that I think influenced my summer going into this whole this new world that we're living in, was being able to find the connections with individuals because they're focused out in New Jersey, and so I managed to get in touch with them and nearly go all the way across the country to a place where I would have probably never even found had going to a marketing fair hosted by UT Dallas or JSOM in general. So that's something that has been worthwhile in that sense too. Have you had any experiences in terms of like engagement with outside sources beyond our state, Trent?
So actually, I had an internship lined up that there were some COVID issues where it ended up not actually going through the entire thing, but so we met in person here at an in-person fair, but then COVID happened, but we did all of our trainings because they're a Utah-based company online through Zoom. And that really propelled our training because the worst thing would be when they finally come here to start the summer off for the sales internship. It was with AmpSmart, if any of y'all know what that is, but it would have been a lot worse going in square one with very little knowledge of the company and not knowing the basic training we would have to go through. It very much slowed down the process by a week or two, but that was able to speed it up. And with the current job I have now too, which is also another sales one, just with an energy company, we're able to do trainings such as, just PDRs, which are just one person's the customer, one person's the sales agent, just able to do that online. One actually saves on time because you don't have to drive to a local location. You can do it from a person's house in another person's house or in the office in the other person's home, which makes life a lot easier. And also, to your point too, you can have an internship almost anywhere in the US right now just because it's going to be virtual no matter what, which I think is great because Texas is great and all. Dallas has a lot of, in Plano have a lot of businesses, but you're not stuck limiting yourself to this. For example, Troy, with you living in Vegas and having an internship all the way in New Jersey, that'd be very difficult without some sort of virtual component taking place.
Exactly. And I think that whole virtual element can also tie into the utilization of platforms like LinkedIn too, that help students to also get in contact. And Professor Egeland, you probably could touch up on this too, and how LinkedIn has provided to be a valuable resource for students that are looking to maintain these connections with individuals that were once avidly like in these like buildings, to completing their business endeavors and like having these full schedules to just being completely moved to home where both their work and their personal lives have just been meshed into one conglomerate.
Yeah, I think you'd mentioned, I think that's, I think you touched on this, the fact that perhaps with, without having a commute and some people being furloughed, you also have access to more executives in terms of, mentoring or connecting you to someone else that they might know that might be able to help you with the job. So I think there's definitely been some positives associated with being able to, from a career standpoint, being able to connect with people virtually, and certainly LinkedIn helps with that. Obviously very searchable. Be sure and get your good content out there and get your recommendations to take full advantage of what that has to offer.
Exactly. And also I have to give you mad kudos for your assistance with my LinkedIn development, Professor Egeland, because there's actually, we had a mutual connection. I don't know if you, I'm trying to remember, Samir, he works at PepsiCo. I don't know if
Yes.
Yeah, so I actually reached out to him via LinkedIn for a recent business communication assignment, just like thinking, oh, like if I message a couple of people on LinkedIn, maybe I'll get at least that one person that will respond back, right? And so that was my my big idea going into the whole process. And then all of a sudden, 3 days later, I get an email from him, and he just has this whole entire listed portfolio of answering some of the questions that I had asked him previously. And I think it was because of that mutual connection of which I was able to that I was able to kind of introduce with, oh, hey, like, yeah, I know Rita Egeland. And he's just like, oh, yeah, no, I know who she is. And
that's terrific. I'm glad to hear that.
Absolutely. So that's also the way that it's helped in that sense too, is being able to have a virtual connection, even though that we may be so many miles apart, like having that common threshold allows to break barriers, even through a virtual format that allows students to take advantage of professional opportunities and being able to network, despite the fact that we're not able to congregate at one table and like have a pamphlet that we can distribute to people telling them about business opportunities. But more or less, it's a way for students to establish those relationships beyond the normal threshold that we have previously experienced.
Very good.
For sure. And then also, I guess this is a really good solid talking point too, for, I guess, a general discussion. I don't know if you guys have it, like optimism in the same sense of everything going back to normal, but I do kind of want to get your take in terms of the time period that you think will be needed to kind of recover, to potentially go back to some idea of what we believe to be normal prior to the pandemic, in terms of maybe going around JSOM, attending classes, things of that nature. What is your guys' takes on that?
Well, as a student who currently does go to some classes on campus, I think it will still be a while, especially in case there is a second spike that does occur. That would definitely skew the timeline. As of right now, they have a pretty good system going on, and I'm hoping it will happen, but I'm sadly not too confident that there will be fully opened up school. But I do think there will be a virtual component no matter what, which is good for students who aren't currently there. But I have just seen just the world around me. I don't know how it is in Vegas, Troy, but in Texas, a lot of the businesses have been opening up more. I've noticed when I'm working, I'm like not even fully virtual on that anymore. It's just staying safe, wearing masks, and I think the masks may be around for longer than just things opening up as well, until I guess we really nail down stopping the spread and making sure there won't be a second spike.
Absolutely. Professor Egeland, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm pretty much with Trent. I'm trying not to think about when things would go back to what we consider normal. I can't imagine it looking that way in the spring. I mean, even with the vaccine, I don't think we have enough time to deploy it.
Right.
But I also agree that I think we're going to be wearing masks for a long time. I know I've always seen people in the US from Asian countries who are just accustomed to being in very high, densely populated areas wearing masks because it's just a smart, it's just a smart thing to do. And that may definitely be a carryover. But I think it's, I think adapting to this and not, being kind of prepared in case there's opportunities when things open up again is a good idea, but counting on that happening is probably a bit premature.
Absolutely. But I mean, also in that same sense of it becoming a commonality too, you often see a lot of students and faculty and staff around JSOM that are helping to create community through the utilization of and the mandatory nature of the masks themselves. I haven't gotten any personally because I haven't been on campus, but I'm pretty sure that the two of you may have probably seen like the UTD masks that have recently came out that are more around campus that are like themed and like help to provide that sense of community. What are your guys' thoughts on that approach to to this mandatory obligation?
I think it's a good thing just out of the fact that it shows not just JSON but also UTD pride, which is lacking considerably right now, just out of the fact that there's so few people on campus, which I think just adds and boosts the morale, puts everyone in a better frame of mind when they see, I guess, that on the mask. It just uplifts their spirits, which in a time like this, it's good to be thinking positively, just because if you keep going negative, it really can get to your mental health, and that's most important right now, as well as your physical health, just with COVID and all that. Professor, your take on this?
Do you have a mask yourself?
I'm actually not ever on campus. So I've got, my mom's in her late 80s and I absolutely can't take the risk. So I haven't seen it, but I could imagine that would be really helpful. And I don't want to take the interview away from you, but before we close up, I would like to hear if you or Trent find any positive in the online teaching or learning experience, rather. So
yeah, no, definitely. Trent, do you want to have your take on it first?
Yeah, I'll take the lead. So one thing I guess is the ease of accessibility. Say, for example, you oversleep or something, you're not rushing, you're like, all right, I still have 15 minutes to get my computer booted up, which is kind of nice. Plus, getting ready as well in the mornings is a lot quicker because I'm not just making sure everything's good. For example, I can just turn off the camera and eat instead of having to make time for a meal before a class or something like that, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
And then as well, it's just sometimes, you're confused on what the professor says, which sadly it's harder to ask questions because depending on if you're, like, for example, I know Teams has like the raise your hand option with Zoom. Sometimes you're just muted because the professor, it's hard if there's 8 different students interrupting with a question. So you can pull up and just research what the professor said and kind of get more clarification either through their e-learning page or another, I guess, credible online resource, which is kind of nice, which was a lot more difficult because I know some professors aren't too big on technology in class. So that altogether, I guess, is a positive from this, which is good to be looking towards just because with all this negativity going around in the world, it's just good to think positive once in a while. Troy, what's your take on this?
So the funniest thing going into this whole entire shift and what's been drastic on me specifically, especially going 2 time zones over, has been the time change in some of the classes that I'm currently enrolled in. For example, I'm in the midst of taking a microeconomics class that normally is planned in 8:30 in Central Standard Time, but now that I'm on Pacific Standard Time, it now begins at 6:30. So I often find myself waking up at like the same hours that I was back when I was in high school, like making sure that I can attend these lectures and be there synchronously, because I think having that synchronous availability still helps to create that sense of class atmosphere more than ever, and I think that's just something that more students should be able to kind of take advantage of, is that synchronous option, because it allows them to be held accountable, allows them to kind of live in the moment as opposed to like taking at a self-pace. But at the same time, if you're in a more drastic situation where you may be living on like a completely different continent, or you might be somewhere in those lines where like there's like an 8 a.m. class that's now beginning at like midnight where you're located, it might not be the most advantageous thing to be attending in that in-person type of format, which definitely can be a bit of a hassle. But that, I think also I find myself more utilizing office hours than I did previously in prior semesters as a result of the pandemic, mainly just because the teachers that I am currently, professors that I'm currently associating with and taking courses with, the funny thing about it is that the students that are attending in person, the professors only know like them from the nose up. Like they never get a chance to like see their face. They never get a chance to like get that sense of nonverbal recognition, like the smiling, or like get a sense of readability in terms of expressions. And so attending it virtually in this format, being able to have a camera on and be able to interact with the professor that way allows them to at least get a sense of idea in terms of who you are, and they can match your personality to a face as opposed to just seeing a giant bubble with your initials on it, which has definitely been a commonality based off of some of the discussions I've had with professors. But just having that time to set aside every single day to go and have those individual office hours with your professors, I think is the most ideal thing at the current moment, because being able to establish that personal relationship that exceeds beyond the subject material of the classroom, I think is the most essential thing, especially when it comes to obtaining recommendations, being able to continue your networking and potentially have that evolve into something potentially even better as you go forth with your studies and learn to get your the qualifications you need to become an active member of the workforce. So it's definitely been a great change too, especially because coming back to Vegas, I transitioned from like a bedroom setting to like a smaller office space that I managed to find within the confines of my household that I've been working out of actively, and just holding myself accountable to be in that office space for a certain amount of period of time, and like not go out constantly to like go get food or like go to the bathroom often or anything like that has often been something that I say, all right, just gotta sit down at the laptop, take a swig of a hydro flask every now and then, and just get pressing with work, because the holding yourself accountable, especially in this type of environment, is definitely more stressed, more in terms of meeting deadlines and being able to hold yourself accountable to achieving the academic success that you may be looking for. Definitely. Awesome. And then I think that we're coming close to our time overall, but Professor Egeland, we're actually going to be starting this trend going forth with a couple of our podcasts. As we are members of the Wise Words Committee for the Undergraduate Deans Council at JSOM, we're actually looking to create an ensemble of wise words from all of our esteemed guests that we have on our podcast, as well as our interviews and things of that nature. So I do kind of want to ask from your particular standpoint, based off the subject matter that we've been discussing and some of the topics that we have, what's the best key piece of advice that you can leave to viewers of this podcast that may be listening at this moment? What do you think would be the most key takeaway thing that they can do in their day-to-day endeavors?
You know, I think we touched on a good amount of it in the discussion, because it's along the lines of, if you have access now to, technology, you're set up, you've got an office space, you've got a better environment maybe to reach out to your various professors, to maybe people in their network, to really utilize the time to maybe build, if you're not, because I think Trent was very honest about, you know, the time commitment and putting as much time into school. You might want to look at the skills that you could develop that would be helpful for you either in school or once you graduate, and utilize that time for either developing those skills or really taking a more critical look at your educational and career path, and you know, really thinking about, you know, there's not a lot of distractions now. I'm not going out and, you know, meeting friends as often. Maybe you're still going out and, you know, with CDC guidelines and, you know, doing it in a thoughtful way, but there's still more time available to invest. And since that's really what college is, a huge investment, I would recommend, you know, leveraging that further by thinking, what else can I do now that I've got the ability to, you know, connect, I've got the space to connect, and I've got more time. So that would be my guidance, my wise words.
Definitely. Well, that's actually really helpful advice. I'll be sure to take that into consideration going forth with the rest of my college pursuit. But once again, thank you, Professor Egeland, for coming out this evening and being able to engage in this this format with us. It's definitely something new, and it's something that we're going to be adjusting over time. But this has definitely been a great first start. And with that all being said, I am Troy Murray.
And I'm Trenton DeStefano.
And we are actually happy here to let you all know that we are wishing you all to stay safe, stay healthy, and stay scholarly. Until next time, we'll be signing out.